Have you ever wondered how elite runners can maintain such fast paces over such a long distance? Well, the answer is pretty simple, and I'm going to tell you how. My name's Drew. I'm an amateur runner here in Flagstaff, Arizona, and today I'm going to get into what easy running is and what is its role in your training plan. Easy running is often the bulk of your training volume and will act as the key enabler for you to develop aerobically and to hit all of your paces both in training and in your races. I would classify easy running as anything with an RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, of less than 5 out of 10. So that could be anything from a 1 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10, which might be more of a steady effort. And if you like using heart rate as a metric for your training, your heart rate on an easy run could be anywhere from 50% of max, which would be a recovery or very slow run for most people, up to about 75% of max, which can be, again, more correlated with that 5 out of 10 RPE. For example, someone with a max heart rate of 192 beats per minute, that might be anywhere from 96 beats per minute up to 144 beats per minute. So it's a pretty broad range, and it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your easy run. My own definition of easy running encompasses everything from a recovery run, which would be a very slow run, up to something that's more steady or more of a moderate effort. Easy running is also known as conversational running. So if you can't maintain a conversation while you're on an easy run, then you probably aren't running very easy. If you're able to maintain a normally paced conversation where you can say a full paragraph without gasping for air or stopping to pause to breathe, then you probably are maintaining a fairly easy effort. And when I say a paragraph, I do mean a paragraph, not a sentence. So if you're stopping every sentence to take a breath because you're working too hard, then you've definitely crossed from that easy range into more of a moderate effort. And much like any other type of running, you want to know before the day starts and before you start putting in your work, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? On an easy run, usually the purpose is to build your aerobic base and to recover and to provide some sort of aerobic stimulus for your body without taxing it too much and requiring recovery after that run. So even something like a moderately paced, steady effort still does not require very much recovery time because you're still within that general easy range. It's not very taxing on your heart. It's not very taxing on your muscles and your ligaments and your tendons. It's just a steady, easy effort that you can maintain over a period of time to build that aerobic base. Once you cross into the moderate zone, you're getting closer to something that's just above your marathon pace. Maybe it's around your marathon pace. Some people, if they really don't know what easy running is, they might even be running closer to their 1 hour race pace or threshold pace, which is definitely not easy running. It's very moderate. It can be very hard as well. So always think about what is the goal of this run. If it's easy, try and stick to what easy running truly means. So my favorite visualization of the value of easy running is from Jack Daniels. It's from his book, The Jack Daniels Running Formula. There are several versions. I have the 4th version. It's the one with Sarah Hall on the cover. I'll put it up over here. Overall, this explanation of the functionality of the heart and the stimulus that you're trying to get out of an easy run is extremely valuable. So the heart has 2 ways that it can pump more blood during exercise. One is by larger stroke volume, so it actually fills up with more blood and then pumps out more blood into your body. And the other is by pumping faster, so more pumps per minute. However, the heart cannot continue to grow infinitely. So it's mostly limited by that stroke volume. So the famous running coach Jack Daniels claims that the force and volume of each stroke of the heart is limited, and it kind of caps out at about 60% of your max heart rate. So when your heart is pumping at 60% of the maximum beats per minute, it is at the point where it is filling up with so much blood that it cannot continue to expand and suck in more blood. At that point, the only way that it can continue to pump more blood is by pumping faster. And so your heart rate will increase as the intensity of the exercise increases. So usually on an easy run, in order to get that high aerobic stimulus, but have a really minimal recovery time, then you want to stay within that 60 to 65% of your max heart rate range, which is usually, that's borderline between zone 1 and zone 2 for most people, but you can still go up to zone 2, maybe even that 75%, which is right in the middle of a zone 3, in order to get some sort of aerobic stimulus and not be working too hard. That's still not a very hard effort, and it probably doesn't require a ton of recovery time for most people. The purpose of easy running is to elicit a high stimulus, aerobic stimulus, on the heart with minimal recovery time. So your easy running is usually your time that you're trying to recover from your harder efforts during the week, but you also want to get some benefit out of those days that you're training. So every day has a purpose. If you're doing speed training, then you might be getting anaerobic stimulus. If you're easy running the next day, then your goal is both to recover, but also to get some aerobic benefit as you recover from that previous day's exercise. And then the next day, if you're like me, you probably will take about 2 days in between harder sessions. So you also want to elicit a high aerobic response with a low recovery time so that you can go and hit your next session pretty hard. Your body feels fully recovered, but you're not necessarily stressing yourself on those previous days to the point where your harder session will be impacted. So by following this general rule, this means for someone like me, 60% of my max heart rate is about 115 beats per minute. Most of the time on my easy days that are truly easy, I am usually under 115 beats per minute for maybe the first half of my run. That second half of my run, maybe I'm getting up to 125, 130 beats per minute, but that's generally very slow for me and feels very comfortable. I'm breathing very well. I could have a conversation and enjoy myself, and it's not a taxing run. So that's why usually staying in a zone 1 or a zone 2 for easy running is a good idea for most people. And that'll probably make up about 70 to 80, maybe even 90% of your training volume, depending on which stage in your periodization that you are in. If you're in a base building period, you might do 90% of your running at a relatively easy pace with some strides mixed in, maybe a little bit of threshold or some very short interval work once or twice a week. Because the point of that base period is to build up as much aerobic capacity while not having a huge recovery requirement on your body before you start putting yourself into a higher volume and higher intensity mix in your training to get more adaptation, to get faster, and to work on some of those other things. So on the lower end of your easy range is your recovery range. And for me, a recovery run, my heart rate could be as low as 105 beats per minute, maybe 103 beats per minute. Sometimes when I'm starting, it's even below 100. And that's just because I like to start off very, very slow, ease into things, and make sure that my body's responding well if I had a hard session the day before or if I'm really needing that extra recovery time. I'm personally a big fan of movement, so active recovery for me is a lot more valuable than just kind of resting, more of a traditional rest. So I always like to run. I personally prefer to run every day. And if I take a full day off, it's usually after something like a really hard race effort or something where I just really maxed out and I need more of like a mental recovery than a physical recovery. So small note with easy running. If you like training based on heart rate, then you can follow the basics of about 50 to 70 to 75% of your max is that broader easy range. I would say the majority of your easy work, like truly easy, should be in that 50% of max up to about 70% of max. That's probably the bulk of your training volume. So that's what easy running is, but how are you going to implement it into your routine? My best tip for finding out what your easy pace range is or should be is by going online and finding some sort of pace calculator. I would recommend using the V.02 pace calculator. It'll give you training paces based off of a recent race performance. So for me, if we use my recent road 5K of 15:53, it will spit out a pace range of 6:39 per mile on the faster end or 7:21 per mile on the slower end. This also translates to 4:08 per kilometer or 4:34 per kilometer on the slower end. I personally don't like to put limitations on how slow I can run on an easy day. I do think that the pace range is accurate of about 6:40 per mile. That's usually when I start moving into the moderate zone. For me, that 6:40 pace for me, it can be up to 9 minutes per mile on a really slow recovery day. And on some of those slow recovery days, that 9-minute per mile mark is about 5:36 per kilometer conversion. And living to altitude, it means that my paces are a little bit different than at sea level. So if you live in a mountainous area where you live above like 4,000 feet up to maybe like 8,000 or 9,000 feet, maybe in Colorado, there's some areas that are even higher than that, you're gonna have to adjust your pacing accordingly. At 7,000 feet for your marathon pace, it's usually about 15 to 18 seconds per mile. For me, since I recently moved to altitude, that means it's usually about like 15 to 20 seconds per mile conversion where I'm running slower at altitude than I am at sea level. So that caveat about not putting limitations on how slow you can run, I think that's very important because a lot of people will do the calculation of their easy pace and they'll say, oh, if my easy pace is supposed to be 8 minutes per mile to 9:20 per mile, I shouldn't ever run slower than 9:20 per mile. And that's just incorrect. I firmly believe that you should be running the paces that your body needs, not on the faster end. So don't change that upper limit because that's there for a reason. But on the slower end, that 9:20 per mile, if that feels comfortable to you on a recovery run, that's great. But some days, if you did a hard workout the day prior, you may have to run 10 minutes per mile or even a 10:15, and that's totally okay. Or maybe it's 9:45. It doesn't matter because the goal is not to be hitting paces on a recovery day. The goal is to get active recovery in, limit your recovery time post-run, and improve your bodily function prior to going out for your next workout the next day. So you're just starting to get into running, or maybe you haven't done a true base training period or true easy running in your training. How are you gonna do a gradual progression to get up to a good volume of easy running that'll allow you to progress and start working in some harder efforts? So my own experience as a running coach and as a runner, a relatively new runner, so I've been able to learn as I go over the last few years of taking running more seriously, is that most people believe that they're doing an easy run, and in reality, they're in a moderate zone. So they're kind of in that high zone 2 to low zone 4 of their heart rate, and their RPE is totally off. They're gasping for air as they're running, and that is not going to get you anywhere. You're gonna run yourself down, and you're not gonna develop aerobically, and you're gonna just be exhausted all the time. So it'll really take away from your overall goals in training. And the way to avoid that is by thinking back to some of these principles that we've covered of the physiology of easy running and the purpose in your training plan. Okay, so let's recap. Number 1, easy running is a range. It starts at recovery pace and goes up to a steady effort. Number 2, conversational pace or conversational easy running should make up the majority of your training. It's probably somewhere between 70 and 90% of your total training volume. Number 3, RPE should be your main metric. Next would be pace, then heart rate. These metrics can be used to really understand, are you truly running easy, and are you working toward that daily purpose? Number 4, without easy running and aerobic development, your body does not have the ability at a cellular level to progress to running faster paces than what you're running today. And lastly, number 5, use the VDOT calculator to find out what your easy running pace range is and get rid of that slow end of the range and run as slow as you want. All right, that's it for my easy running fundamentals. If you like this video, give it a like, drop a comment and let me know if you do easy running and how you figure out what your RPE or your true easy running pace is, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.